Good afternoon and welcome to episode 5 of Meet the Founders. My name's Beth. I'm the project manager at the multivitamin group. And today we'll be joined by two fantastic speakers. They'll be sharing all of their insights and experience of building brands that resonate within their communities. So our first guest is going to be James McConaughey. James was, or is, should I say, a product leader with over 15 years experience. He's a former founder of Peer, a startup focused on teaching people all about saving and investing, and head of product at, well, should I say, now head of product at ASIN, a B2B SaaS startup, and recently closed a $12 million series of funding. So we have a lot to learn from him. Following James, we'll then have Andy Ash. Andy is the chairman and CEO of the Racing Manager. After 30 years working in the financial markets of London, Andy made a life-changing move and he went into sports tech with the Racing Manager, who are now expanding globally. After our guests' presentations, Jacob, our founder and creative director at the Multivitamin Group, will be leading a panel discussion. He'll be putting forward your questions to Andy and James, so please add any questions you may have to the Q&A below. We'll try and get through as many of them as possible, but if you have any questions, just add them. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome and hand over to our first guest, James.
So the first thing that I really wanted to highlight, hi by the way, my name is James McConaughey, is that big products are founded around solving a problem for small but really engaged communities. And that is nothing new. It's been around since the start of software, the start of hardware and products before kind of the technology age. This sort of image I've just sort of flicked up there is obviously Woz and Jobs presenting the Apple One. And they're doing so at the Homebrew Computer Club, which is a small community of basically technology hobbyists and enthusiasts back in the early days of kind of Silicon Valley in California. And really that group were highly passionate about the fact that technology, and more particularly personal computers, they believe was going to change the way that everybody went about their day by day lives, both in a personal perspective, but also from a work perspective as well. And what kind of Woz and Jobs managed to do is really plug into that community and get them super passionate about the fact that it can be done so much better than it was already being done before. Before it was seen as very much a business-led focused activity. It was very cumbersome, very heavy. PCs were really in their infancy, and it was a load of hobbyists playing with circuit boards. And they were able to really show that if you get a really engaged community brought into the journey, you can get people really interested in where you're going with it. And people have just carried on that further. So as you can see up on the screen here, it's the early days of Facebook. Again, it was a small community. It was basically the group that were trying to connect Harvard University in a closer way by delivering an online Facebook to replace an already offline product. And really that is a really critical element. It's around the intersection of the technology being available and a community which allows huge products to thrive out of something that is very small. And I think that's something that's really, really important for people that are engaged and interested in product going forwards, because you need to understand what that problem is first. Once you understand what that problem is for a specific community, you can engage that community to refine your problem and understand it in so much more detail so that the solution just kind of falls out of it. Now, those two companies started out from very humble beginnings, collectively now worth over $2 trillion. So I think it just goes to show that very small starts can turn into huge things. Now, from my perspective, what does my career look like, and why should I guess you kind of dial in to listen to what I have to say about it? My career started out in the technology delivery space as a management consultant at Deloitte. Now, Deloitte, the work that I was doing there wasn't super product focused initially. It did become so later in my career there. But what it did teach me is the absolute criticality of understanding the problem in a really, really low level of detail. The more you can understand that problem, the better your solution is going to be for a particular community. And the best way to bring those kind of problem points together and those pain points together is to form that community. And when I decided to leave Deloitte, one of the things that I wanted to do is make sure that I got involved in a startup, or in fact founded a startup that found a very niche community and then tried to build the solution on top of that community, as opposed to necessarily jumping straight into something that was kind of big, scary, and far too hard to break down. And once I left Deloitte, I went on to found a startup called Offer, which was focused primarily on the equity crowdfunding space, which at the time, back in 2015, was very much a burgeoning community of people that were interested in this space, trying to understand different ways that they could support small but growing businesses. And equity crowdfunding was clearly a real point of excitement for a lot of people in that era. The likes of Seedrs and Crowdcube were being able to connect startups to people that were users of their products and were really passionate about those products, so much so they wanted to invest into those businesses. And we were able to build quite a nice community around Offer that was very focused on the alternative finance sector. And it basically connected people that wanted to learn more about it, but also wanted to compare and see all the different things across the broader sector. And really what we saw our role in Offer was to bring all those elements together and connect them. Now, what we decided to do off the back of Peer is pivot that into a business called Peer. And the journey that we'd gone on through Offer is we realized that the size of the community that we were trying to service with Offer was certainly very engaged, but the market size wasn't really quite up to the point where we felt we were able to really take on a bigger chunk and solve a bigger problem area for that group. So we actually took the business from Offer and then, as I said, pivoted it into Peer. And Peer was focused primarily on the savings and investment sector to try and encourage people to learn about investing. So the concept was the same from Offer, but we felt like there was a greater need in the broader market as opposed to servicing some of the groups that we were looking after from the Offer space. And actually, you guys at Vitamin were kind of instrumental in helping us shape that brand for Peer, but also shape out the product. One of the things that we wanted to do with Peer is really be community led. The whole equity crowdfunding sort of phase taught us the importance of understanding your community and connecting with them, with the likes of people like Monzo, Revolut, who were going through funding rounds via those equity crowdfunding platforms. And we really wanted to take that and bring that into the savings and investment space. And we basically built the product community led up. So right the way from looking at the branding of Peer, understanding the tone of voice that we wanted to communicate with our customers in, right the way through to the actual design and the build of the product. The community were involved in every sprint of activity we were carrying out, and we were engaging them using a product called Discourse, which a number of the different startups use to help engage that community base. And that was a phenomenally great way for us to understand uniquely what the pain points were and start to form the product around that community that was suffering the same challenge. And really that's the key message that I really wanted to get across today. Understand that pain point, get obsessed by that pain point and find the community that sits around it. And my current business, or the current place where I work is a place called ASIN. No longer a founder, but head of product of the team at ASIN. And really what ASIN is about is we're building a product to help some of the largest financial institutions in the world better manage operational risk. And the way that we're doing that, taking on board all of these lessons of that kind of journey, is trying to instill in the product the fact that as the community grows and more businesses start combining and contributing to that community, the product actually gets stronger, because it's all about sharing of information and insight across that whole network. And really, I think that kind of strand right the way through my career, but I think it's a really important lesson for any sort of aspiring founders out there, is to understand that problem, understand that pain point, and spend time obsessing about that problem and pain point. Find the community that is experiencing that same pain point and start to formulate your product around that. And from there, you can start to move it on to bigger and greater things. Okay, so that was my little intro.
Thanks, James. Fantastic. It's nice to hear from your background, hear a bit more about your career. Am I right in thinking that's your part of the presentation?
Yeah, that's me. Good.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, James. Thanks so much. Next up, I'd like to welcome Andy Ash, Chairman and CEO of the Racing Manager.
Well, thank you very much indeed for inviting me. My name is Andy Ash. Behind me, you can see the large library of books I've read on technology. as in none. So I was launched into the Racing Manager just over 3 years ago, having done no technology in my life. I had a career, what I would say, leading quite a lot of innovation in financial products. And what James has been through just then in his presentation resonated strongly, because not only do you have to establish what the problem is, you have to be sure that there is a market place for people who want that problem solved. And certainly in our city careers, myself and my co-founder, Martin Burton, we were both involved in the derivative markets in a very, very early stage. And a number of the products now that you would see being used, such as ETFs, we could readily lay claim to introducing the first ETF in the world. But we were 5 years too early. I have recently moved flat, and I discovered our brochure for that first ETF, and it was a absolutely perfect illustration of what James is saying, that you have to not only know the problem, but you have to engage with the community to find out whether there is interest in solving that problem. And we solved the problem without having any customers who wanted it. The Racing Manager is a totally different thing. I was invited to sit on a committee at the British Horse Racing Authority, which is the governing body, while I was working in the city. And they wanted to try to do something about increasing ownership in the sport. The horse racing is an interesting sport. It has what is gauged as 11 million people interested in the sport, and it has 6 million spectators a year. It is the second biggest spectator sport in the country, and is a very significant global sport, a very large employer of people in the UK and Ireland, specifically Ireland. But with that, it is unbelievably archaic. When I was on this committee, I had a trigger point when they were talking about all the problems. And to put that into perspective, the problems are that if you are an owner of a racehorse, the likelihood of you making any money is close to zero. Even HMRC give you all your VAT back because they categorize it as a zero chance bet, owning a racehorse. So how do you get people into ownership? To give you a quick idea of the maths, to own an average racehorse costs £35,000. To train it for a year costs £25,000. So to own a racehorse and to train it will cost you upwards normally of £60,000. It is a very rich person's game. So in the same way as we were talking about crowdfunding with James, crowdfunding, or as we know it, syndication or ownership groups, is a very large part of horse race ownership. If you can divide down a financial liability to a level where it becomes not meaningful to the person who is putting the money in, such as a football season ticket, such as going to the cinema, or such as having a bet on the Grand National, if you can put down the ownership down to that sort of level, then the actual financial return of something becomes irrelevant. And you are only gauge the enjoyment on it by the process of that enjoyment. So that is what we went out to try to create, a platform that would encompass data, media, using all the similar social media designs to actually entertain trainers, stakeholders, and horse race owners. As of where we are at the moment, we have 10% of all the horses in the UK and Ireland are using the Racing Manager. And with that, we are bringing in a large amount of owners. We are a subscription-based model. So our communities are these ownership groups, and everything we develop is driven by those ownership groups. They will come to us and they will say, we would like you to develop this. And if we think that is relevant to all the other ownership groups, we will do it. And consequently, we have to keep doing that. We have to keep innovating. I am a very large believer in the most valuable part of any industry, and certainly in technology, is creative people. And there are very, very few of them. Said I hadn't read any books. One of the first books I ever read was about Google when they founded it, and the half the book was talking about them wrapping their creative people in cotton wool. And we think we have some very good creative people, but as I've said, their innovation is only ever any good if the community actually wants it, and the community will run with it. We are closed user groups, so the platform is not open to anybody. It is a subscription platform, but we try to keep it as a members team platform. And we think our brand is incredibly strong, to the extent that we are now getting people wanting to be part of this development and community development from America, from Australia, from New Zealand, from China, and we're having to sort of be fairly slow and studious in how we move into those areas. I'm not going to go on too much further, but what I would say, we're very fortunate in the marketing of this product. We are just about to move on to another site, which I might get a chance of showing you later, called Only Action, which is going to be much more focused out into the public to bring them into the sport. But at the moment, we don't have to do any marketing at all. We know who the owners are, we know who the trainers are, we know who the horses are, and they all know each other. So all we have to do is make sure that we deliver a top quality product to that community who all speaks to each other, and you end up with a pyramid effect that as long as you start well, you drive the momentum that the other stakeholders in the industry cannot afford to not have you, and that is how we're developing it. There is lots more to discuss on this. Our biggest competitor is WhatsApp. But WhatsApp is, which is a hell of a competitor to have, especially on the budget we've got. But WhatsApp is a non-targeted product. And a lot of these communities will always use a free non-targeted product, which will not actually do the job that is required by the community. So we, with the help of Vitamin, we have developed a lot of our own algorithms. We produce a lot of our own content. We produce a lot of our own design, and we entertain through that and create conversation. It's something that WhatsApp can only do to a certain level, as in Facebook, and both those entities produce a lot of negativity. Our platform is based on positivity. We only put out positive news. We try to put a positive spin on bad news. So people want to come to our sites and our app, and they want to join the community because they actually feel that they will get better news from it. To put that into perspective, 95% of racehorses never win a race. So it is not easy to give out good news when your horse is useless, which most of them are. That ends my little introduction, but I'm sure we'll have lots more to chat about.
Amazing. Well, Andy, it's quite interesting to hear so much about that, and how, I mean, when you've got something positive to put out, you're bringing the community back into your business. So thank you for sharing that with us. Now I'd like to introduce Jacob Beckett, the founder and creative director of the Multivitamin Group, to open this afternoon's panel with Andy and James.
Hi all. Yeah, no, thanks for that both. I just wanted to zoom out a bit and ask, what does a community actually mean to you? Starting with James, please.
In the context of product or more broadly?
Well, in terms of product, in this.
Yeah, in terms of product, fundamentally for me, it's about people that are going to engage in that community as well. You know, lots of people talk about a community, but it's typically, when people are talking about that, that's their market that they're pitching to. A community is a group of individuals or companies or whoever it might be that's going to give back to that discussion. And that's the critical element. You're not going to solve a problem with a community that is silent in response to anything you publish and put out and just try to stimulate discussion. And in fact, if anything, the most active communities and the most interesting communities are those that take the first step and sometimes lead the product or lead the organization in the direction they need to be going in. And so for me, it's around ensuring that you can encourage a free flow of information about a common purpose. And that common purpose could be small, as I kind of introduced in the presentation, or at times it can be very, very big as well. And there's plenty of good examples of communities that we've all seen over the past 6 to 9 months pop up in a broader sense of the word, given everything that everybody's going through. It's that shared purpose and that ability to contribute, which is at the heart of community for me.
Yeah, and you said a group of individuals or companies there. I wonder whether your transition from peer, which was very much consumer, I don't know whether B2B and B2C are relevant now, but moving on to ASIN, where clients are banks, do you still perceive the big banks as communities? Because that might not be everyone's normal interpretation of what they are.
Yeah, they absolutely are our community. You know, it's around, they are ultimately customers of a product, and they have wants, needs, you know, at the lowest level of a user perspective, but also at an organizational level as well. And in fact, some of the best B2B communities the best communities out there are great B2B communities. You know, think the likes of Salesforce, MuleSoft, like some of these organizations have built an absolute passionate base of people that are business users, but absolutely love the product. And they want to shape the product because it enhances what they're doing on a day-by-day basis. And consumer products are, in a way, sometimes easier to find your community because, you know, as soon as you find what that group is, it's sometimes easier to find that niche of what they're looking at, whatever it might be, you know, whatever that space is. When you start looking about business users, that's harder because often the products that are given to them, they are just the products that are given to them. It's very hard for you to naturally go and hunt out a community. You almost have to, you either build it off the fact that when somebody starts using your product, you bring them in on that journey, or you find the common pain points across an industry and then go and engage with those pain points and build a product around that.
Yeah, we used to get a manual with any enterprise software, didn't you? But do you think we should now scrap B2B and B2C as terms and just do business to human?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, from the way, and this is, you know, I know you helped us on ASIN as well as you did Peer. The kind of the brief that we put to you and the brief that we set our product and engineering team internally at ASIN is we want to deliver a product that customers are going to love, that they're going to enjoy using, as well as enhancing and saving them time in their day-to-day jobs. And there's no reason those things are mutually exclusive. You know, you can deliver both. And people expect it now. There's so many good products out there that are in our day-to-day lives. As soon as you hit a product that maybe isn't designed to delight and excite and interest you, you know about it and you won't go back to it unless you really, really have to.
Yeah. Well, you know me, but yeah, I couldn't agree more, to be honest. Andy, same to you. What does a community mean to you?
It's interesting. I'm glad
in a product sense again.
Yeah. I'm glad I'm following James because he stimulates my answer. If you'd asked me first, I would have just sort of shrugged. But the interesting thing about the communities, our community are all in competition with each other. So when we're talking about the B2B when you're talking about corporates and companies being in a community, they can be competitors, but where we've found ourselves is the governing bodies of the sport and of all sports are much derided by the users of that sport. You see that a lot in football. They're forever having a go at the top organisations in football. So if you can build a community that is essentially taking them on with something much more exciting. I'll just, if you spare me 1 minute, I'll tell you a little anecdote. When about a year ago, we had a venture capitalist come in and visit us, and he wasn't, unfortunately, looking to take us over. He was just trying to pick our brains, and he said, we've invested heavily in rugby, we've invested heavily in Grand Prix, we've invested heavily in Premier League, and we're looking at horse racing and what we can do with that. And he was due there for about half an hour, and we sat there and chatted for 2 hours. And at the end of it, I said, there's way too many problems here for you to be an investor, isn't there? And he said, no, with problems, there come solutions which can allow us to invest. When Facebook and Amazon's probably not a community, but when these products started, they were never thought that they were going to take on, Amazon was going to take on Walmart or Marks and Spencer's, or it's just that their community has become much bigger and they've done things much better. And so they dilute everything, every good idea. I mean, Warren Buffett always used to say that the amount of money that's ever made from a good idea is absolutely minimal compared to the damage it does to all the other industries it's replacing. I don't think airline industry's ever made any money, but horse and traps aren't doing so well. You know, and it's so communities they are very powerful in a commercial sense. And I love the idea of competitors coming to us and saying, how are we doing? We're using your product, but how are we doing compared to the other people? And they all want to know. That doesn't mean they don't like your product.
But that elevates the whole industry.
Yeah, they want to be the best. They want to be the best user of your product.
Yeah, and just to draw a parallel with James's point on I won't mention it after this, but B2B and B2C, because you've got a similar client base, I think. You've got single owners who are very wealthy. You've got 4 people who met down the pub and decided to club in. You've also got massive syndicates that are run like businesses, and they are businesses. How do you design a product that can cater to the diversity? And well, I don't know whether horse racing is diverse at the moment, but the diversity of different models and clients.
Well, it's very hard. What one tends to do is drink a lot of lager and just ask you, Jacob. And then you come up with a solution, and I go, yes, that was a very good idea of mine. It's not an easy thing to do, because we are very much servicing a lot of people with different criteria. But interestingly enough, the very large sole owners, so these would be billionaires, who we think shouldn't be attracted to our product at all, find it fantastic, because actually they can put all their friends and all their family on it, and they actually create their own little mini community, which previously they were just on their own. Everybody, we're mini communities in a bigger community. And everybody is there for the good of what we're trying to achieve. I think as long as you are trying to achieve the right thing, most people, corporate, be it single, they will all join with you.
Yeah,
you've got to have the right. We won't be showing these slides, but the slides I had all put down what you've got to stand for. You've got to stand for trust. You've got to stand for integrity. You've got to stand for all these things that people will buy into. Because
we can share them after. We'll share the slides.
We'll share them after, just between the 3 of us.
And you mentioned Andy, brand and how powerful that was, but I wanted to ask James the same thing. Like, how do you build a brand that resonates with the community that you're marketing to, and how important is that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, probably I'm more focused on the product side, and the marketeers will be more focused on that. But I think what's important at the intersection between marketing and product and what people think of it is just that you need to make sure that your brand aligns to the problem areas that you're trying to solve. So if, for example, if you've got a community that's formed around a specific problem area, you need to ensure that the messaging of your organization is aligned to that. And that's something that the marketing team in ASIN spend a lot of time making sure that we do, because ultimately you have to understand who you're supporting, who are the ones that are going to be using the product, and what are the pain points that are going to be resolved from that. As soon as you can understand that, and you can understand how the product is used in anger in that regard, then the ability to communicate effectively around that is so much easier, because you can speak with authority about it, because you know you've already connected with that community that is suffering that pain point. They immediately, if you're trying to project a brand around, looking at the Apple example around ingenious design, etc., like the ability for them to be able to project that brand is only possible because their product delivers it. The two have to be absolutely aligned, and it's ensuring that those two areas of organizations, and in fact the whole organization, fully understands the pain that your customers are going through and the benefit that the solution delivers. And that means you then have a very consistent way that you can communicate with the market, both from a prospect's perspective, but also more broadly to the wider industry.
Mm-hmm. And I know.
Can I ask a question, James? The danger of being too specific is, I suppose, is if there's an existing community using another product that isn't, that is a historic product. How do you do your brand? It's quite hard to not want to lose your existing customer base, or to try to go and get the new customer base. That's a problem we've had a lot. What would your advice be there?
That's a good question. You kind of stumped me a little bit on that one.
That's why I didn't answer it.
Yeah. Let me think about it. So, I mean, look, I think the core thing is understanding the thread of that community, right? If you have a community base that is an existing product, for example, that is, right, this is the problem we're solving, this is what we do, this is the pain point we relieve, but then you feel, or you have discovered that there is another pain point you've got to start tackling, and you have to start tackling it. I guess the two options you've got in front of you are to either spin up a separate product which has a separate feel, as a separate approach, but it's fundamentally the same organization, but you have a different product to service that pain point, and you formulate that group around that particular element, or you keep it together and you try to migrate that kind of product community over. I think some of I'm just trying to draw parallels to maybe some of the big kind of tech companies that clearly do a lot of M&A activity, and try to do it that it's similar but not the same. I think Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, clearly same parent co. I think they have very different community bases. There's a lot of people I know that would not use Facebook, but will use Instagram, every hour of every day. It's the same organization, but what Facebook have been very good at being able to do is maintaining the division, I guess, of that community and what that community stands for, whilst appreciating that Facebook is servicing a different product community and WhatsApp a different community as well. I mean, hard to draw those parallels because we're talking huge organizations and huge businesses, but I think that's the decision. It's either you merge it as a single community and say as a single product and say, this is just what we are, and you risk losing the old community, or you say, actually, we're going to have two separate products that service two separate communities. Yes, there's going to be shared elements of those products, and you may have shared elements of the branding, but that's, I guess the way that I would unpick that.
Yeah, because I mean, me as a creative, I kind of split them up. I do love designing products based on user feedback, but I think brand is slightly different. I feel brand, you want to do the research, but you almost need to be confident in the solution and put it out there. It's like if you ask thousands of people what a brand should look like, it might be a bit of a brown sludge, whereas if you ask what the product, then you can structure it into a product backlog, pick them off the top, and then work through it in a structured manner. So I think they do need slight separation. I mean, if Monzo were asked, I know you worked in the fintech space, James, but yeah, if they were that if they crowdsource their branding ideas, they might not have come up with that coral card and various other ones. But yeah, I don't know.
Although they did crowdsource their name, for example, so they were Mondo
Okay.
until they had to change their name, and they went to the community and says, "What name should we pick?" And they picked the name that was most popular. So, you know,
And they're not called Boaty McBoatface. So
yeah. Yeah, you've got to take the outliers off, right? Top and bottom always.
okay, I didn't actually know that. Crowdsource that. And Andy, I know we've worked together for a while, and the brand, we did a lot of research, but then we kind of created that based on insight, and we didn't go out to too many people. And then the product, I also think, like, we started building that based on your knowledge, you trying to solve a problem initially. But then now I'd say we're completely at the other end of the spectrum, and the Racing Manager is really only being built by, I mean, we're building it, but the community is shaping pretty much every decision. Not to take anything away from you and your vision, Andy, but is that a fair point? And did you notice that inflection point when it changed from your vision into the community-driven product that it is today?
It's an interesting one, because when we sat down and did the brand, which I'd never done before, we listed all the major players in the sport, and we said, right, and it was unbelievable how their brands were all the same, which was a horse.
It's all a horse over a seraphim.
Or a crown, or something green or something purple. You know, it was, they all had identical brands. So we created what was a significantly impressive brand. You know, it has been complemented all over the place. But ironically, our biggest challenge, and I'm be delighted to hear from anybody who's listening how you overcome this challenge, but is our average ownership. The average ownership of a racehorse in the UK is 60 years old. And there are even though there's great interest out there.
The average owner, not the average.
The average owner, not the average horse. No, no. The average horse is about 3.
Blue by that point.
The average owner is 60 years old, and an industry, and so many industries do this. If that is their average owner, they will develop everything in the sport to look after 60-year-old people. Which is why you don't get any 20 to 30-year-old people, because everything is geared to what is already in existence. So when we try to create the brand, and what we have done is our demographic on the Racing Manager is considerably younger than the rest of the sport. So we can actually hold our heads up and say, look, we are making a change. And the other very interesting thing is that 40% of people on the Racing Manager are women.
Well, what
and
now?
I would say
what was the industry?
Would be 10%, if that,
right,
would be female owners. So if you can get your brand right and you get your positioning right, you can draw new people in. You know, it's and that's how you grow something, when you actually say, look, we don't have any 20 to 30-year-olds. Why not? Because they don't have any money. This is the first generation in the history of mankind that's had interest rates of 0 for 15 years. This generation does not know what saving is. They only know what spending is.
James, weren't you trying to solve this with?
I know. This is why I moved on from Pia.
Well, it is true. It's very hard to get them. And actually, if you speak to people, they will say, saving to me is I'm saving to do a bungee jump in Thailand, which is a bad savings plan at the moment in COVID. But they are a spending generation. So if you can get those people into the brand, you're nearly home and hosed.
Okay, and then if I can just go back to the product then, because I mean, when you came to us originally, you had a very fixed vision as to what it would look like, and I think a lot of that's come true. But do you now feel like you have succumbed to the market, to feedback, and you're building based on that? And I'm just interested in this inflection point, because we did build behind closed doors.
We did, but I like what James said, is that where we might be now is where we should have been in the first place more. That we instead of us deciding what people wanted, we're now being driven by people telling us what they want.
So
that has
if
to be
you
a
were
more
to,
sensible thing. We probably got a bit lucky because it was pretty obvious what they wanted, but we didn't do anywhere near as much survey evidence as we should. We did some, but you know, if you did it now, you probably would do more. I think you'd get the same answers, but now people are phoning up, well, not phoning up, emailing, and constantly with ideas for us.
yeah. So if there's a take up from that, like if you were to do it again, it's to just do a lot more research, try and piggyback off WhatsApp, off Facebook, off any other platform, and test and research before you spend money.
I mean, do we believe that pretty much all these platforms are only just a derivation of one big pool of the top 5 platforms or something? You know, we think of the idea and then we fit it into the technology platform that it suits most. By trying to redesign it, restyle it, and everything else. But there are only simple solutions. There are only a number of solutions here.
So don't you just do that until you reach the ceiling, and then you go, right, now I've proved the concept, now I've got product market fit, now I need to build my own product, and I've actually got the impetus to do so.
I don't want to be in any account sound arrogant, but we have got so many ideas, and throughout life people have lots of ideas. It's only just getting up and doing them, and now we've got the ability to do something with these ideas. That's the exciting bit. It takes a hell of a lot of energy and a lot of money and a lot of good fortune to get any good idea going. But it's exciting if you've got a platform that you can actually build some of these ideas. I have no interest on standing still.
Yeah. And James, to again bring it back to the same point, like Pierre, I remember you were doing lots of research groups at the initial stages, as you said, you had discourse running and you were building that community beforehand through social as well. Like when then translating that into ASIN and having a bank, surely you can't approach it in the same way. I mean, how do you actually start to build the product, to build the community with a product such as ASIN?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, I think the first thing to note is that our user base in the ASIN world, they have pain points. They have things that they want to be better in their world, and they want those to be enhanced and improved and bettered upon. So you have a captive market already. You have people that want to share their pain, right? They want to say, "Oh, I do this thing every week. It absolutely kills my week. Takes forever. I just wish somebody could find a way to solve that problem." So you're still able to identify and have those conversations with that client set in that same way. Now, it's not maybe quite as B2C as it might be, and you're not going out and finding lots of kind of random people to have conversations with and exploring the problem areas there. It's a bit more focused because you're dealing with your client base or your customer base. But you still absolutely can engage them in that same way, and that's something that we've tried to do with our group at ASIN. Next week we're kind of running an intensive design sprint, for example, where we're going to be having conversations, interviewing, presenting the prototype back to customers to say, this is the journey, this is how we believe we can solve the pain point that we believe you've currently got, and ensuring that we understand that problem area properly before we cut code. And that is absolutely critical because of, as we all know, the pain and the effort that's involved into that. I thought Andy's point was very, very interesting around the tons of ideas. I can totally relate to that. There's a good business should be not short of ideas. The challenge is around prioritization. And if you can digest down all of those viewpoints from multiple sources and multiple inputs in whatever it might be, an interview, a conversation, a meeting in the pub, whatever it might be that's related to your customer base, if you can distill that down into a common problem that is consistent across your customers, whether they're businesses, whether they're consumers, then you found a market that you need to service better because you can build a solution for that group. And that's really how we prioritize that feedback that we can still get from our customers in the same space that we're in B2B as we would be B2C. We make sure that we frame it around a problem, and then we can propose a solution based on feeding that back to them in those sorts of forums, and be that design sprints, be that user group sessions, be that all of those things that we still do in the context of ASIN as I've done previously at some of the B2C places that I've worked.
Yeah, and you haven't hit any roadblocks when approaching big companies and saying, like, we want you to help design this product. Enterprise level, do they not expect to be given a shiny box and be able to use it straight away and it'd be perfect?
Sure. I mean, it's not, you know, we're not going with a blank piece of paper, and it's a slightly different space in that the product, you know, was in existence. There is something there, but it's like, if we want to make this better and we want to enhance that product to get a better experience for the customer, deliver better value for the customer ultimately, and build a better product, then you will find that they're all ears. They're interested in those conversations, but they absolutely do. It's about ensuring that you frame it in the right way. You know, it's not, you know, you're still saying the product is valuable and it's still delivering a huge amount of value for the organization already, but it's how can we do better? And people in that respect, if you frame that right, will be very forthcoming with what they want to get out of the product and the pain points they want to solve on a more strategic level.
Yeah, that's reassuring that the market is adapting, because I feel like I have witnessed some of the old school approaches before. So if I've got a great idea, or I've had a great idea, I've validated it, I want to get community building, and it requires a product to do so. I just wanted to talk about how you actually get there, because I'm a proponent of Agile, Scrum. I like using it. I think it's effective. I think it's a nice tool that allows you to circulate these ideas back in and prioritize the backlog. I know both of you have had some exposure to it. I mean, do you think, like, yeah, I just wanted your thoughts on that. Is it worth getting an MVP up first, where you just waterfall an MVP to put it in front of people so that you can gather the data, or do you build up in a more stepped manner? And yeah, James, if you could talk through that, it would be great.
I look at, ultimately it depends on the community you're trying to service, the problem you're trying to solve for that group. You know, ideally for me, it's always about getting something out that feels uncomfortably early. And I think that's the phrase that's used quite widely when you hear people like Reid Hoffman from the founder of LinkedIn talking about it. You push something out that you're almost embarrassed about, because you're going to get the input from it. Now that's easier to do in a B2C space, so that's worth.
Just on that, so you're suggesting uncomfortably early, but then we hear all sorts. We hear MVP, minimum lovable products. Now we hear all sorts, but you think early as possible, do you? Well,
no, I'm saying that's a theory that some people go on, and I think if we're talking about a consumer product, I would get it out as early as possible, with the thinking that is probably throwaway, but you will learn from that process, and you will refine it or build again to deliver that. Now B2B is a very different space. Clearly, you're talking about selling to businesses that are serious organizations. You know, they're not going to have a poor product put in front of them and say, it's okay, we'll get better in 6 months. Now, they will give you a certain degree of leeway around, okay, I can believe the journey that you're going on, but you have to be more focused. Now, what you can do in the B2B space is focus in on a very, very specific thing that you're going to solve. And that doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're going to solve in the lifetime of that product, but it means somebody would buy it, because they, you know, if you think about a framework like jobs to be done, if you can find that job to be done that somebody's going to hire your product to be able to do it in a context of B2B, and you do it well to the point that it is well finished and ready to solve that job. Or
so just jobs to be done, similar framework to like user stories, but it's like a different approach.
Yeah, it's like the concept is everybody hires a product to do something, you know, and that concept of what's that job that you're doing, what's the emotional elements that you're trying to resolve or solve with that particular job. If you find that in the B2B space and say, I'm going to do that really, really well, I want to do all of this other stuff later, and I will come to that, and I will solve those problems for you as well. But looking at this wedge, if I can get that narrow wedge in and prove to you I can do a good job, you've got the ability to be able to build your community and I guess get your foothold into that sector and that space, and you can grow from there. Whereas the consumer market, you can be much more agile. You can get things out early in front of people, almost with the feeling that you can kill it and rebuild far quicker than you'd ever be able to do from the B2B space and sector. So it really depends on the market and what you're trying to do. But I'm always a believer of, even in the B2B space, getting something in front of somebody early, even if you're not releasing it, at least you're getting some feedback and input so that you can understand and learn whether you're actually going to deliver on your hypothesis that you've set yourself about that problem.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. And then Andy, similar question to you. Looking back on the past 3 years of product development, I know there's been combinations of Agile, Kanban, a few different strategies employed. But what do you think worked well? And for anyone listening, how would you advise that they approach product development? What kind of methodology should they use?
I think it is what James says is totally correct, because you've got to know.
I need to start asking you questions before James.
Yeah, well, I find it quite easy. I just repeat what he says. You've got to know who your user base is, and how tolerant they're going to be. If it's a free product to consumers, just get it out there.
But your user base, sorry to interrupt, but your user base is owners, it's trainers,
and they're paying money, and they're paying quite a lot of money, and it's a very small community where everybody knows everybody, and so your reputational risk is considerable. If you mess up on your first time round, it's unlikely you're going to get another go.
So you're saying that you couldn't have physically built the product with that amount of feedback. You needed to have something polished before you got out.
We had to have something polished, and I remember having these conversations with yourself and a lot of people, and I said, we are not releasing it in this state. We are not releasing it in this state. And eventually, actually, we have one of our shareholders is a past chief executive and chairman of a couple of
system to it. Do you say, right, as soon as 20 people recommend this feature, then we build it? And yeah, James, you first, please.
So from a prioritization perspective, it's really hard. I mean, ultimately for us as an organization, we've got strategic objectives we're trying to deliver upon. From a product organization, within that broader organization, we have product objectives. And we have kind of objectives and key results we align up around those. And then we clearly take feedback on from customers, and we build that into a framework that allows us to assess and analyze customer feedback and the tipping point between customer feedback and the strategic objectives. And we try to balance that and ensure that we're delivering on the customer pain point specifically, whilst also trying to move on the more strategic agenda that we have around a broader kind of product focus. So what we've got a couple of tools that we use to help manage that. We use a product called Product Board, but we also more kind of informally just analyze against some pretty kind of well structured OKRs, which allows us to assess whether we should prioritize on certain features that customers are inputting into or internally that we're suggesting as part of our broader roadmap.
Okay, so you've got a business strategic, a customer objective matrix, and somehow from that filters out a nice even backlog.
Basically, yeah. But I don't build my backlog around features. I build my backlog around problems, as I'm sure you probably have picked up on what I've been banging on about. Naturally going to assess and understand how much effort's involved in that. I mean, I think that's probably one of the most challenging skills for product leaders. It's about balancing all of those priorities and trying to get a good night's sleep, which right now is not always the case.
Oh, and with a new baby. And Andy, you have to have a different answer to this one, because you're not building an operational risk platform for banking. You're building a horse racing platform. So how do you prioritize your backlog? With your ideas, with the community's ideas?
Well, I totally agree with James. I think, Jacob, you'll agree, and have said it many times. Our platform is one hell of a big bit of kit, and it is a highly complicated website that is drawing in all sorts of data and all sorts of lots of other things from lots of different places. But what it means is you have to start being strategy orientated, because when you are looking to do something, it is going to have multiple effects on lots of the other parts of your platform. So the bigger you get, the more strategized you have to be. The danger we have is we still have an unbelievable amount of short-term fixes that have to be done.
I was going to mention this because at the beginning you're just building product, you're mainly building product, then you're gathering feedback, and at the moment sometimes it feels like you're reacting more than you're building, and sometimes you're just about on top of it.
We desperately try to keep being proactive, but you cannot help but be reactive, and if something goes wrong, you've got to sort it out, which means that you start to lose, if you do it for too long, you start to lose the cohesion and the enthusiasm towards what you were trying to build, because actually you're just getting tired of sorting out problems. But it's part of the game. But we now are trying to be much more cohesive in what we are going to bring to the community. We ask the community what they want, but we're much more reactive if they say, I would like this, and that fits in with other people's views of they would like this and something else, and we can build the whole feature together and it holds together. And yes, that's probably been forced upon us.
Right.
But it's fun. Where's the beer?
Well, on that note, I want to say thank you. It's been incredibly insightful. And if anyone wants to hear more, then drop us a note. We'll share any resource that we can to help.
Yeah, thank you, Jacob. Thanks, Andy and James. It was really great to hear from both of you today, and a very interesting panel. For everyone who's listening as well, thanks so much for joining us. Really hope that you found the tips useful, and I hope to see you, have you join us again next month. If you have any questions or if you have any projects of your own that you want to ask us about or have any questions of, just reach out to us, and we'll be following up with a recap email shortly. But yeah, thanks again, guys.